It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Welcome to Rico Brogna. We have an opponent. We have an opponent for the 2024 National League Championship Series. I stayed up. You stayed up. I even took the scorebook out. I brought the scorebook out for Dodgers-Padres, winner-take-all Game 5. There was a time when I was a lot younger and a lot more single in which I would score so many postseason games. I got so many of these in my books. But over the years, I've become a snob. It's just Yankee playoff games and the rare times the Mets are in it. Basically, anything that we would talk about on the radio. The non-Met or Yankee playoff games, we never talk about. So the times of scoring non-Met or Yankee games have dwindled. But on a Friday night in mid-October, it was a special occasion because we as Met fans have had our feet up over the last couple of days. We're chillaxing and we're just waiting. And I used this game as a chance to scout, as a chance to game plan our NLCS approach as the Mets waited on an opponent. I mentioned this on the Rico the other day. The majority of Met fans found themselves convinced that the Los Angeles Dodgers were the preferred opponent. And the reality is the Dodgers are a very talented team. The Padres are a very talented team. The Mets are underdogs against either team. That's the truth. And I did not have a strong, passionate rooting interest on who I'd prefer the Mets play. This is not, 2000 when the Braves are taking on the Cardinals or the Yankees are taking on the Mariners where, I have a very strong preference on who I would want to see the Mets play. So I was with most of you guys about preferring the Dodgers because of all the questions around their starting rotation and the Padres clearly having more answers, despite the fact that Dylan Cease has forgotten how to pitch. So I sat down with that mindset. As I watched this game, and Kike Hernandez, who is literally one of the most obnoxious guys in baseball, when he hit that bomb of a home run in the second inning, I found myself very naturally rooting for the San Diego Padres. I did. And I don't know if I was rooting for the Padres because I just wanted to see them tie the game up and have this game go 19 innings. I don't know if it was that or if just watching those obnoxious Dodger fans and watching that Dodger lineup. Shohei Ohtani didn't do much in this game. And overall, had a pretty quiet series besides the home run. But watching him, watching Mookie Betts, seeing Freddie Freeman, seeing the nastiness of their bullpen was great in this game, and it had been great specifically over the last two games against San Diego. For whatever reason, I found myself rooting for the Padres. So it's kind of like what I figured. I had an opinion, but then the game started, and I started to be very, very conflicted about what I wanted. But I also thought it was very obvious early on, as Yoshinobu Yamamoto put together one of his best performances as an American major leaguer with 5 brilliant innings, but my cousin Dave Roberts could not wait to get him out. So one thing about Dave Roberts, he's going to do something in the NLCS that's going to make us, as the opponents, say, wow, thank you, cousin Dave. Now, in this case, it worked out fine because the Dodger bullpen with Evan Phillips and Alex Vesia, before he got hurt, more on that later, Michael Kopech, Blake Trainer, they were all dominant. I mean, the San Diego Padres had no chance. And honestly, from the second inning on, you kind of knew that. It felt like it was inevitable that we were getting what we got, which is the New York Mets against the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I was very mixed throughout the game. I found myself rooting for San Diego. So Pete Hoff asked me right before we started the podcast, he said, are you happy? And the reality is, I'm happy that we're in the NLCS. I'm happy that Sunday night we have a baseball game. But I don't know, Hoff, if there was ever going to be a scenario where I was going to be happy about whoever won this game because I don't like either team. I really don't like the Dodgers. And you start to get worried. You start to have the fears of their best players doing damage to us. So am I happy right now? I'm not happy. I'm not miserable. I have confidence in our team. But no, I'm not happy. I didn't get the result I wanted necessarily.
It's funny because as I was listening to the final outs, as I was driving into the station, and I was going, maybe there's a way the Padres can come back right here because I do think we could beat the crap out of them. It's like I've been so positive since like May, June with this team. But as we inch closer, you're right, the negativity starts to creep in because we've been here in the past, and we're getting too close now.
Yeah, look, I think that with there still being a little bit less than 48 hours before first pitch, I think I can be very rational. I think you can be very rational. I think most of us can be very rational. We can give honest, opinions about the Dodgers and this series without getting crazy about what's on the line. So I will tell you right now, just less than an hour after the Dodgers made it official, there's something about them, as star-powered as they are, especially the first three hitters in their lineup, when you got to go through Ohtani, Mookie, and Freeman. But there's something about the LA Dodgers that feels off. And I don't know necessarily what it is. Is it the fact that they just flat out don't have good enough starting pitching? Like Jack Flaherty's okay. I mean, he was a very solid pickup by a team that's still in it, by the way, or got sold off by a team that's still in it. Like Jack Flaherty's okay. Yoshinobu Yamamoto put together a hell of a performance, but he doesn't exactly put the fear of God in me. This Dodger bullpen is pretty solid, so it's not necessarily anything about them talent-wise, but maybe it's the fact that they're always there, they're always the favorite, and they always find a way to come up short. A lot of times in the division series, we saw that a year ago. We saw that 2 years in a row. We saw that in the National League Championship Series when they were supposed to be clearly the better team over the Atlanta Braves. So maybe it's their history of just coming up short that they don't feel like a team of destiny. They don't feel like a team with magic. I think the Padres did. And it's weird. It shows you how quickly magic can go away. The San Diego Padres were the hottest team in baseball going all the way back to June. As much as we like to make that argument about ourselves, hey, the Mets are the best team since June 1st or June 5th or whatever date you want to pick, we were actually always the second best team. The Padres were the best team. And so think about how hot they were. They make the playoffs. They annihilate the Braves, and they jump out to a 2-1 series lead against LA with a Game 4 at Petco, and the Dodgers literally not having a starting pitcher. Like, it was done. All the momentum was on their side, not just from this series, but from the last few months, and then they stopped hitting, literally, against the Dodger bullpen for 9 innings, against the Dodger bullpen in Game 5 for 4 innings. They could not hit. And it's sort of sobering because it's a reminder about how quickly things can change. There was no evidence or signs that the San Diego Padres were going to just stop hitting, which is exactly what happened over those 4 games. But they felt like a team with magic. They felt like a team with that, kind of pizzazz that we have. The Dodgers don't. Now, that doesn't mean they're definitely going to lose to us. It doesn't mean they can't win a World Series. Because, look, I don't think the Yankees feel like a team with a lot of magic. But I'm sure there are Yankee fans tuning into the Rico right now, and they're like, well, we can win the World Series. Of course you can. I mean, anybody who's left can. But the Dodgers feel off. They've always felt off throughout this season. Does that translate into us beating them in a best-of-7 series? Hopefully so. I do have a confession. So I'm watching this game. I'm exhausted. Like the last few days, it's been a lot. And it was the 7th inning. I'm caught up live. I'm out on DVR. And I always say this, when you're tired and you watch baseball, it's not what's happening in the game that could put you to sleep, at least not for me. It's the commercial break. Sometimes those commercial breaks are so damn long that you pass out during one of them. And that's exactly what happened. Right after Alex Vesia came in and struck out Jackson Merrill, and it's a 1-0 game going into the bottom of the 7th inning, I absolutely passed out. I started drooling on myself, the whole thing. I woke up, and it's so weird because I didn't wake up an hour later. I woke up as Darvish was coming off the mound after he had given up the home run to Teoscar Hernandez and got Max Muncy to fly out. So it was a good 7-minute cat nap that I took in the middle of this game. But obviously, Teoscar hits that home run, and it's like, all right, this thing is over. The Padres are showing no signs of life. They're not coming back. Looking at this Dodger lineup, though, like 1 through 4, because I'll include Teoscar Hernandez. He is dangerous. The rest of that lineup doesn't scare you. It's the megastars at the top. It's Ohtani. It's Betts. It's Freeman. And Freeman is clearly compromised. He's not playing healthy. You can see that defensively at first base. But Freddie Freeman has also haunted our dreams. I mean, how many times has Freddie Freeman stuck it to us? So that is certainly a very scary part about this Dodger batting order, the top three guys. I'm going to assume, like rotation-wise, we are going to see Jack Flaherty and Walker Buehler in this series. We'll see Yoshinobu Yamamoto a little bit later in this series, probably over at Citi Field, where I'm sure we'll have a lot in store for him. What's the taunting chant that Yamamoto needs to face? You know, we do that very well around our towns, where there's a guy, he's a rival, and we start chanting their name in some kind of, mean way, intimidating way. Is it Yoshi? Yoshi? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you guys as Met fans, but it's got to be something because you'll want to get on him. Didn't want to be here. Didn't want to be a Met. Made Steve Cohen waste his time flying over there. But I do assume we are going to see Flaherty. We are going to see Buehler. And we'll see Yamamoto. And then I'm not sure what else. In this series, the series against San Diego, they went with a full bullpen game. That's a little bit more difficult to do in a best-of-7 series. It's a little bit more difficult. But I would certainly expect that Dave Roberts is going to try that. And here's the risk when you have bullpen arms and you're aggressive using your bullpen. And this is an advantage I do think the Mets have because they've gotten length out of their starting pitching. You look at the length of Minaya and Severino, outside of Kodai Senga, who's being used as an opener, one of the positive attributes that the Mets have is that they're getting a lot of innings out of their starters. And this is something that really hit me, I think it was a few years ago with Aaron Boone, where they would have these lanes for their relievers. And by the time you get to a game 4 or a game 5, dare I say even more than that, these guys, these bats, see the same pitching over and over and over and over again. So take Michael Kopech, who looked so good when he came in for the Dodgers in the 8th inning. If the Dodgers are going to be really aggressive with their bullpen, and I assume that they will, because is Yamamoto pitching 7 or 8 innings? Is Walker Buehler pitching 7 or 8 innings? They're going to have a bullpen game in all likelihood. So you're going to see Michael Kopech almost every day. And if Pete Alonso is seeing him 4 consecutive games, which is certainly on the table with the off days mixed in, you have to think the advantage goes to those batters as a series goes on. So I do think that's one of the negatives when you're a team relying very heavily on bullpen work. I think it's one of the things that's hurt Detroit in this series against Cleveland. Like after a while, you see the same guys over and over and over again. So this Dodger bullpen looks great. The Mets have done amazing work beating up bullpens. That's been their strength so far in this postseason, going all the way back to Milwaukee, going back really to Atlanta. If you want to include that as like a mini playoff in game 161, they couldn't hit a starting pitcher. They get to the Brave bullpen, they destroy it. We saw that with the Brewers series. Can't hit the starters, get to the bullpen. We certainly saw that in the finale, game 3, the winner-take-all game. It happened against the Phillies. Can't touch Zach Wheeler, get to the bullpen. Happened the other day in game 4. Could not break through against Ranger Suarez, breakthrough against the Philadelphia Philly bullpen. As good as the Dodger bullpen is, and it is very good, the more times the Mets are going to see the same guys, the better for them. The other thing with the Dodger bullpen, and I'm not sitting here rooting for injury. I don't want to be that guy. But when Alex Vesia comes in and strikes out Jackson Merrill and then comes out to pitch the 8th inning, something physically happened to him. I don't know if it was a side strain, maybe a lat, something like that. But that's not good. The Dodgers have 2 lefties in their bullpen, Vesia and Banda. Vesia is pumping in 95-mile-an-hour fastballs, making Jackson Merrill look clueless. And who knows about his availability in a potential NLCS. So that was certainly something. I want to give you thoughts on this Met rotation and how I would handle things. But we did receive Rico emails in the middle of Dodgers-Padres with some instant analysis, including Ryan Green, who had a conspiracy theory. Evan and Pete, I'm watching Game 5 of Padres-Dodgers, and the announcers just talked about the Mets flying to L.A. I caught that, by the way. I tweeted that one out. I'll play that in a second. And Fox showed a commercial of Ohtani versus Judge. Is the MLB scripted? Are they telling us that it'll be a Mets-Dodgers NLCS and then a Yankee-Dodger World Series? I am so confused. Well, Ryan, I think the Ohtani Judge thing is simply pumping up two megastars. So that's not really anything. But Joe Davis, who you're going to hate. Like, Joe Davis is a good announcer, but Joe Davis is the Dodger announcer. During this offseason, I watched a few Dodger press conferences. Like when Ohtani signed, I was curious. When Yamamoto signed, I was curious. And Joe Davis is Mr. Dodger. He's the MC. He's the guy with his big announcer voice. So he can be as neutral as he wants to be. He is a Dodger announcer. So he's going to drive us nuts. By the middle of game one, Met fans will have turned on him, and we will acknowledge he's just a Dodger shill, even if he's not a Dodger shill. But listen to Joe Davis and what he said in the middle of this broadcast. It was 1-0. I think it was the 5th or 6th inning, and Joe Davis says this. Listen very carefully.
You've been part of 8 different postseasons.
Oh, no, that's not that. That's Kiki Hernandez being a douche. He should be suspended, by the way. I'll play you the Kiki thing, too, just so you can hear it. And I apologize. He's about to curse. So for anybody who is offended by cursing, mute the Rico for the next 30 seconds.
You've been part of 8 different postseasons here. What is different about this particular team? Are we live? We're live. The fact that we don't give a fuck.
I mean, what a douche. Like, with that little smile on his face. Like, you know, when you say the F word out of raw emotion, I think that's great. When you say, are we live? Oh, we're live? I'm going to drop an F-bomb. Just proves he's a real horse's ass. I think Rob Manfred should suspend him, personally. I think he should be suspended. I'm screwing around. All right, here's the clip I'm talking about the conspiracy theory.
Mets are going to fly here to Los Angeles tomorrow. And what a story they are.
The Mets are going to fly to Los Angeles tomorrow? Why are they flying to Los Angeles? We don't even know who their opponent was at the time. So, yeah, that's making the rounds. Either Joe Davis did what I did on the air earlier today, which is accidentally assume it's going to be Mets-Dodgers, which I did, or he got the script. By the way, I want to thank Anthony, who was emailing me all night with updates of Jeff McNeil playing in the Arizona Fall League. He was there. Drew Gilbert was there. Jet Williams was there. So Jeff McNeil certainly feels like he's on his way back. I don't think there's any doubt. And I think he's going to be added to this roster. Mendy was asked about the theory I brought up the other day, which is if you're going to add Jeff McNeil, shouldn't you put him and have him replace a pitcher, a guy like Danny Young? And Mendy didn't say he would. He just said all things are being considered. I think that makes a lot more sense than taking Luis Angel Acuna off the roster. Negative Dan wrote this 20 minutes into the Dodger-Padre game. 20 minutes in. So it's early. I'm not even sure the Dodgers had taken the lead at this point. Maybe they just had. Here's what Dan writes. It was always the Dodgers. I do not even have to watch the rest of this game to know there is no chance we'd be facing anyone but the Dodgers to try to go to a World Series. Yamamoto turning down Uncle Stevie and Stearns after flying all the way to Japan in the offseason. The Jorge Lopez fiasco that is looked at as the benchmark to this entire run. The Ohtani Lindor MVP debate. And of course, having to get past playoff Freddie Freeman just to top it off. There was only one team it was ever going to be, and the script was already written back in May. Now we just have to hope if we get there, the screenwriters choose the Tigers to complete the 0-5 to OMG storyline instead of the Juan Soto Subway Series of death. Well, that's quite a name for a potential World Series, the Juan Soto Subway Series of death. Yeah, I think that sometimes after a matchup is set, whether it's in the NLCS like this or it's the World Series, it's so easy, especially if you're a wrestling fan or you like entertainment or TV, and you're like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. This is the perfect storyline. And I'll be honest, I never thought about the Dodgers being a perfect storyline because of the team meeting, because of Jorge Lopez, because of Yamamoto. It makes sense now that Dan brings it up. Hey, the Dodgers were a big part of the Met turnaround. It's a great point. But I'd be lying if I told you I thought about that 2 days ago when we knew the Mets could play the LA Dodgers. But you have put this in my head, Dan. If this run to a championship, and dare I say it ends with a championship, needs perfect storylines, then you're right. It's the Tigers. It's not the Yankees. It's the Tigers. It's not the Guardians, because the Tigers had more of an impact on the bad of our season. Now, the Mets did get swept by Cleveland. It was just one of those forgettable sweeps, though. I'm trying to think back to when they got swept by Cleveland. I don't remember much about it. They didn't score a lot of runs. It was frustrating. They lost all three. Obviously, we know what happened in the Subway Series. The Mets went 4 for 4. Mikal Bridges got traded to the Knicks. Luis Severino made the comments, which I'm still deathly afraid of coming back and haunting him, which is they have 2 hitters and nobody else. But you're right about the Tigers. The Tigers are a big part of that highlight video when you think of this season. The 0-5 to OMG was against Detroit. Nobody in the building, getting no hit. Here's the trivia question. Does anybody remember who was no-hitting the Mets that day? Because I don't. And I don't even have a scorecard of it because that was one of those afternoon games, right? That was a doubleheader, if memory serves correct. So Dan is giving us the script. It's the LA Dodgers in the NLCS, and then potentially, if we are fortunate enough to get past them, the Detroit Tigers in the World Series. Will writes, with all due respect to the great city of Los Angeles, FLA, I was hoping for a Padres Mets series as my wife is a San Diego native and my almost 3-year-old is baseball obsessed and likes both teams. With that being said, I'm relishing the chance to dismantle the arrogance factory that is the Dodgers. I despise seeing Darryl in the stupid interlocking LA in the 90s or Justin Turner and the dumb hat more recently. It's not to the level of the Yankees hatred, but I only realized how much I loathe the Brooklyn defectors when Tatis made that last out. Bring them on. Let's go Mets. You know, the Mets have played the Dodgers now in the postseason 3 times. 1988, 2006, and 2015. And it feels, and I don't remember 1988. I was 5 years old. I no recollection of it. I've gone back and watched some old games. I've seen the Mike Scioscia game, which is just, thank God I don't remember that. Thank God that was not a part of my Met fandom memory, because that is as bad of a freaking loss as one can have. You hear the stories, but then if you watch it, and it's not just Mike Scioscia taking Doc deep. How about Jesse Orosco being on the Dodgers and getting like Darryl Strawberry and Kevin McReynolds out? Kevin McReynolds made the last out of the game, and off the bat, it looked like it was falling in for a base hit. Seriously, go back and watch that, or at least watch highlights of it. But it doesn't feel to the older Met fan that 2006 and 2015 ever even things up for 1988. 1988 still remains like this bitter pimple in Met history. They had to go to the World Series. They were the better team. They were going to go there for the second time in 3 years. They own the Dodgers in the regular season, and then they lose this just absolutely brutal 7-game series to a team that they were better than. Now, I remember 2006. It was a very forgettable series. The Mets were a far better team. I think I mentioned this the other day. The only memory I have of that 3-game sweep, or vivid memory, is the Paul LaDuca, Sean Green play at the plate double play, where 2 guys were coming in trying to score, and the Duke tagged both of them out. That's really it. They obviously swept them. They won game 3 in LA, and the next round was the disaster. 2015 is a classic, though. 2015, I've said this before, is one of my favorite, specifically game 5, my favorite game arguably in Met history. Now, that's up for debate now because the Mets have put up some games here in 2024 that are certainly challenging that. But 2015 was awesome. And yet, to a lot of Met fans, the older Met fans, it hasn't evened things up for 1988. And so what I wonder, would beating the LA Dodgers, not in the divisional series, and I understand that that's one of the differences, but the National League Championship Series. Would that be enough to say, okay, we've gotten our revenge? Again, this is before my time. I don't remember 1988. My lifetime is beating the Dodgers in the postseason. 2006, 2015. Would this be enough to say, all right, we evened it up with them bastards? Let me get to the rotation because I have a very strong opinion about this. So there's a report. I'm not sure if it's accurate or not, but there's a report from Andy Martino that the Mets are leaning towards Kodai Senga in Game 1. Respectfully to Carlos Mendoza, who is very tough to criticize, even though we will still criticize him and first guess him and second guess him. That's not what I would do. And it's not a knock on Kodai Senga. To me, here's how I lay out the rotation. I'll be very specific, and I've given it a lot of thought, and I'll give you my reasons for all of it. The Game 1 starter should be and needs to be the tribal chief of the Met rotation, Sean Manaea. Sean Manaea has clearly proven over the last couple of months he is the best pitcher in this rotation. I was making a point on the fan the other day, and I totally see the other side, but I was making the point, hey, if I'm the Yankees, I want to maximize Garrett Cole. I want to be in position that if necessary, I could start him in a Game 1, a Game 4, and a Game 7. I'm not necessarily telling you I would push Manaea to that, but I want to have the option. His 5th day is Sunday, so it would be complete regular rest. Sean Manaea has been far better on regular rest than he has been with longer periods of rest. So the numbers already back up that you're getting the best out of Sean Manaea by pitching him on his 5th day. So let's start there. And I think most people agree with me. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of pushback on that. Sean Manaea should start Game 1. That's number 1. Number 2, what do you do in Game 2? In Game 2, I would start Kodai Senga. And I would have an available David Peterson to back him up. And potentially Tyler McGill. And potentially just using your bullpen. Let's see what happens in Game 1. If Sean Manaea gives the Mets another 7 innings, I mean, you may have the most well-rested bullpen in the world. And remember, after Game 2, you have an off day. So you can really unload that bullpen, and you have the off day the following day. And that's a part of why I would want Senga in Game 2 and not Game 1. I do not understand why you would want to pitch Kodai Senga in Game 1. And that's why I'm hoping that report is just not true. Because I would want him on a day in which I have an off day the following day, where I can rest my bullpen up because it's very likely I'm going to have to use a lot of arms. So I would go Sean Manaea Game 1. I would go Kodai Senga, David Peterson bullpen Game 2. I would have Luis Severino in Game 3. That would leave him with a lot of rest. A lot of rest. I think it would be like 7 or 8 days of rest. And that's okay. If you look at Severino's numbers this season, he has been a far better pitcher at home. Those are the numbers. I think like a 2.80 ERA at home, an ERA well over 4 on the road. So far in the postseason, he's pitched on the road. I have a chance to have him lined up for Game 3, Citi Field at home. I'd have Jose Quintana in Game 4. Card subject to change with Manaea. Listen, Sean Manaea pitches 6 brilliant innings, 7 brilliant innings. Maybe I'm down in the series. I reserve the option to bring Manaea back on 3 days rest. Probably won't, but it's an option. Quintana Game 4. Manaea comes back for Game 5. Senga-Peterson combo Game 6. Luis Severino lined up for Game 7 with Jose Quintana ready to go out of that bullpen immediately. That's how I line up the rotation. Disagree? Or is that a nice way to line it up against the LA Dodgers? I think that's the way to go. I don't see the other side. I like to be open-minded, but you're going to start Kodai Senga in Game 1? You're going to go bullpen day in Game 1? Plus, it gives you David Peterson another day. Look, I want to use David Peterson aggressively out of this bullpen. I want him to be a guy that can get high leverage outs because right now in this bullpen, who is in that circle of trust? It feels like it's a lesser level of trust than we've had in a while. But I also understand that when Senga pitches, what are you getting out of him? 3 innings? The best case scenario is 3, maybe 4. And then you're going to need a bunch of innings, and that's likely going to be where David Peterson pitches. But at least you have an off day in Game 3, And then hopefully he could come back and be a big contributor in game 4 and 5. So that's how I'd line up the rotation. The Mets are going to give us an announcement on Saturday. We'll have another Rico, maybe a briefer one, but we'll definitely discuss whatever decision Carlos Mendoza made. But I am voting, if I have any power, if Mendy downloads the Rico, wherever you download your podcast, I would vote Manaea game 1, Senga game 2, followed by probably David Peterson, Severino game 3, Quintana game 4, and then for 5 through 7, if necessary, you would have Manaea, Senga, Severino, Quintana as a tag team. That's what I would do. How are we feeling? Are we confident? Let me know. You can email us anytime, thericob@gmail.com, thericob@gmail.com. But it is official. It's the New York Mets. It's the LA Dodgers for the championship of the National League. We'll react to the Met rotation decisions with a Saturday Rico, and then every game we'll give you instant reactions to this postseason run. Thank you very much for listening, downloading, subscribing. Oh, check out Pete Hoffman if you're listening to us live on YouTube, because Hoff's going on WFAN in the next 5 minutes. So if you want content and you're like, all right, I want more, Pete's going to give it to you coming up on WFAN or the Live Odyssey app in just 5 minutes. If you're listening to this in podcast form, you can always just rewind the Odyssey app. And so there you're good to go. Thanks for listening and downloading. Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.